right, we are going to get started, and thank you for letting us wait a few minutes as more people are popping on. Just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, please check your audio so that you can hear us, but also mute yourself right now, just so that we don't hear any background noise. And then if you haven't done so, put your name, role, and one hope you have for your students this year. I want to start just by saying thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I know that there is a lot going on and you all have many, many things to do. And so we really, really appreciate you taking the time to connect with your peers. We're going to start by introducing who's here with you today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephanie Manny, the Senior Director of Talent and Leadership Development at City Forward Collective. I've been with the organization since its launch in July, and prior to that was the Leadership Development Director at Schools That Can Milwaukee, and spent the previous 20 years in Milwaukee Public Schools. So thank you all so much for being here today. So many things to be doing, so much work to be doing with kids, and I'm glad that you could spend this time with us.
Lenny, I'll turn it over to you.
Lenny Dietrich. I am a school leadership coach with City Forward. I was with City Forward back when City Forward was Schools That Can Milwaukee. I am currently doing some work in a number of schools around the city, as well as ending my role as the Director of Curriculum and Instruction with Seton Catholic Schools, a network of 10 schools in the city. I was a principal, I was a teacher, and I'm thrilled to be here today. And I have to say how impressed I am with the chats that came through in the chat box about your hope is that your kids are safe, that they're feeling cared for, that they're feeling connected, and that brings me great joy. So glad to be here.
And I'm Melissa Caponegro. I'm the Director of the Quality Schools Initiative here at City Forward Collective. Prior to that, I was a school leadership coach with Schools That Can Milwaukee. And before that, I was a principal in Chicago, where I was born and raised. And so I still consider myself a new Milwaukeean, but it's been 2 years. So I have to just say, you know, I'm now officially from Milwaukee, I guess. But again, thank you all for being here. We're excited to hear more about what's happening in your schools. A little bit about City Forward Collective. We won't take too much time, but our vision is for every student in Milwaukee to have access to a high quality school. And we are working through 4 pillars to ensure that we're getting there. One being family and community organizing, the other community informed policy, effective and representative talent, and strategic investments in quality schools. And so our work is consistently evolving as we relaunched back in July. And we're excited for the direction we're going in, and really excited to have this new space where we're bringing in teachers to share with one another. Some of the norms that we have, but first and foremost, know that we are flexible with these norms, knowing that you're at home and that things happen. We know that babies, our fur babies, our spouses, our partners may be popping in and out. To be honest, my current situation is myself looking like I'm in my office, and not even a foot away is my 5-year-old in her fort. And so she may come out of that fort at any moment, but I want you all to know that we are very flexible with this new virtual space. And so we understand that things are going on around you, and just please make sure as much as possible to keep yourself on mute so that we can focus on the task at hand as much as we can. But some of our virtual norms are to be on video. Best practice says it's great to interact with one another through video, since we don't have a lot of social interaction right now. Use the chat as much as possible. If you agree with something, if you love an idea, if you have a question, feel free to throw it in that chat box. There's an option to respond to everyone, and then there's also an option to just reach out to someone individually. If you really like something that Matt shared, shoot Matt a chat and, you know, ask him additional questions or for his information. So use that chat box as much as possible. Today is really about you all and making sure that your voices are the ones that are taking up this meeting and sharing the great things that are happening in your schools, some questions that you have. We're going to be hearing from some teachers in multiple schools that will spotlight some great instruction. And then we'll also have time to have breakout sessions where we continue to do some spotlights and also ask some questions. There has been a modification to this agenda, and so we will have 2 breakout rooms, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So as I said, you will have time to hear from our panelists, and we're really, really excited to have them share some great things that are going on. As you all know, this is new for all of us. So we're all trying to be experts and learn from the best, and again, learning along the way. So we will hear from our panelists, again, go into our breakout sessions, have a few more spotlights, and have some time for Q&A. I was doing well with my PowerPoint. Don't start freezing. Okay, here we go. So as we prepare for the breakout rooms later in the session, I'm going to ask that you rename yourself. And the way that you do that is you right click on your image, hit rename, make sure you put your full name, and then select which breakout room you'd like to attend. If you want to attend a space where we're talking more about culture and that piece with our students, the social, emotional piece of how we're supporting, building the culture in our distance classrooms, put 1 before your name. If you want to hear more about instruction and platforms and ways that teachers are really engaging students and getting innovative with all of these resources that we have, put a 2 before your name. If you cannot do that, just write a note in the chat box and let us know which room you'd like to be in so that we can make sure that we can get you in the correct room. But again, right click on your name, put a 1 or a 2, and we'll get you in the right space. I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie.
I'm so glad I remembered today. I keep having myself on mute pretty frequently, and I'll go through slides and then realize I've gone through 3 slides and I've been on mute. So again, welcome everybody. As Melissa said, we are so excited to be engaging in this new work and really being able to engage directly with teachers. And while we are having those that are having some best practices in virtual learning here to share with you today, this session is really about you. We want you to take a minute and think about what is the vision of virtual learning that you have for the scholars that you serve. When you think about that vision, what do you want it to look like for scholars in this environment? What do you want it to feel like? What do you want it to feel like for yourself? And then think through that, and what are the 3 critical components that would be part of your vision? I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to think about that, and I'm going to ask you maybe to drop 1 or 2 of those components down below in the chat box. Awesome. Make sure you keep those ideas coming in that box below. As you are engaging with the panelists today, I really encourage you to think about that vision that you have for virtual learning, thinking through the lens of what resonates with you that the panelists are sharing, what doesn't resonate with you, what might they're sharing that could work in your workspace, what adaptations might you need to make this work in your workspace, and what additional questions do you have? Well, you'll have the opportunity to share some of those in the chat box. You'll also have the opportunity to engage with the panelists during the breakout rooms and ask some additional questions. This is like really a new time. We have to think critically about how we engage with our families, how we engage with our students. And while it can be overwhelming, like what our district is doing, what our network is doing, we really have to give ourselves the grace to focus on our locus of control. And so our partners at Ed Element, think about this locus of control in thinking about what can we do and what can we have influence over. And so when I think you're thinking about that locus of control, as the panelists are sharing, what are you able to take away that you can actually implement in your space? There are these new terms that keep popping up now, or at least they're new to me in this virtual environment. We talk a lot about synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. Synchronous learning I really just refer to as, hey, taking an online class. We're all in our homes, we're in different spaces, but we're watching this instructor present a lesson to us. And then there's asynchronous learning, in which we have the opportunity to be able to watch a lesson or do something at different times and in different spaces. And I think of that in line with flipped classrooms. And so as we think about equity, as we think about what our students need, research is saying, and those that are further along on the journey are making us aware that we need to have a combination of those things within the instruction in the virtual environment that we are going to offer to our students. You will have all of this information. I do want to mention that from the slide deck at the end of the session today. If you have more questions about asynchronous or synchronous learning, please feel free to drop them in the box below and I'll respond when I'm not talking. We, from our national partners, are really thinking through what does new school look like in this virtual environment. And one of the things that they have shared with us is that there are really four critical components of new schools in this learning environment. There's the operation aspect of that. And I'm focusing this not on what schools or districts are doing, but what we can do as teachers in our classroom. So when we're thinking about operations, we really need to be thinking through that lens of lesson planning. How much time is it taking us? What are the systems we're using to record the information that we're getting? Also looking at it from an instructional lens of what is the floor of expectations that we have for our students. When we're thinking about those expectations, like how are we thinking about the standards and those high impact standards in a virtual environment? Everything that we wanted to do may not happen, but what are those high impact standards? When we personalize those for students, is this about mastery? Is it about new learning? Is it about maintenance? And being clear on those decisions that we're making and what our purpose is. From a cultural standpoint, thinking through how are we engaging with students? How are we engaging with those students that are not engaging with us? What are our systems for that? How are we engaging with our parents? How are we building culture with non-academic activities? And also then finally thinking through that systems lens and thinking through how are we continuing to foster relationships, which in essence are the foundation for any learning. Our hope today is that as you engage with our panelists, that you will hear them talk about this system and how they're engaging in different aspects of this system as they carry on their work today. So always be thinking through what is your vision that you have for your students and what can you take away today to ensure that you are better able to serve your scholars. We're gonna hop right into some time and space with our panelists now. We're gonna start with Fabi and Samantha, who are from Carmen School of Technology and Science, the Southeast Campus, and I'm going to turn it over to them. Welcome, Sam and Fabi.
Real quick also, we're testing something out today where we're allowing others to share their screen so you can see their resources. So I will be popping in and out, stopping the PowerPoint to allow others to share. So just so you know, that's what's going on. And if there are technical difficulties, don't be surprised as we figure it out.
I do want to highlight as the panelists are sharing, if you have questions, please make sure you're dropping those in the chat box because we want to bring those to light as they're sharing.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Fabi Ramirez. I teach social studies at Carmen Schools, Southeast Campus, currently teaching 9th grade world cultures and also 12th grade, Latinx history.
Hi, I'm Sam Stoker. I'm also at the Southeast Campus, and I teach seniors and juniors in environmental science and freshmen in biology.
So we wanted to start off by giving you some context about our project and how we came up with it. Essentially, both Sam and I teach seniors, and we happen to also be senior advisors. So through this time, we have in communication with our seniors, really seen them stress about graduation. Many of our students are not just the first in their family to graduate this year, but in our particular school setting, it is our founding class and our first class to graduate ever from our school. And so this is a really important moment that they're missing. We have students working full-time jobs, 6 days a week at Walmart to help their family who all of a sudden have become unemployed, right? We have students working CNA jobs in hospitals and putting their own lives at risk. And we just wanted to make sure that we're responding responsibly and equitably to their needs. So as Sam and I were talking, we noticed that we had more engagement when we assigned tasks that were more manageable and small, and also relevant to the current situation that our students are facing. So what we decided to do is create a cross-content project for 12th graders with a sprinkle of some 11th graders that aims to get at them reflecting and analyzing how they are a part of living history at the moment and how they might be able to document that process and like the challenges and that they're living in this time.
Okay, so I'm going to attempt to screen share now, so bear with me. Oh, it works already. Great. So in our initial planning process, I mean, Fabi and I obviously just sort of started out talking through text about some of the things we were seeing. And then we created this document just sort of to brainstorm. So we made categories for like what we want the learning tasks to be for each class. And then what types of standards we would be aligning to, what options we wanted to provide students for their product, and then if we were going to include a rubric or not. Fabi's going to get into how we're grading this later because our charter network has sort of created a rubric for us to use in order to grade students. We also included like brainstorming for any graphic organizers, as well as deadlines where they would be turning things in and what kind of strategies would be used to communicate with students. Then we created next steps for ourselves, just the two of us, and we decided that we wanted to bring in the other 12th grade social studies teachers because there's just so much overlap in the content of our classes. So then we met all together in a Zoom meeting and created action steps for all of us through Zoom.
Yeah, so when it came to thinking about grading, our network actually has just shifted to thinking about grading in terms of engagement and participation and how to keep our kids hooked rather than necessarily grading mastery, right, with an A, B, C, or a percentage. And so we have a rubric that we're all norming on, essentially with a 1 being kind of like the kids have ghosted us. We don't know anything about them. We need to follow up in some way. A 2 being like we've Zoomed with them, we've talked to them, or maybe we have, some like incomplete work, but something was turned in. And then a 3 being that they like mostly mastered what we asked them to do and they turned in their task, or we had a Zoom call with them, and while maybe like the actual answer on there wasn't in Google Classroom, like we talked through it on office hours, or we had a communication with them that allowed us to see that they're at a 3. So again, this is really flexible, and we're going to share this with you guys so you can see and see what works for you, but we're using a lot of different sources to show what evidence we can use for giving a kid a 1, a 2, or a 3. And so as we broke down our assignment, we decided to use this strategy for each week. So each week we're going to give kids a 1, a 2, or a 3 based on whether they completed the small task that is a part of the larger project that we've created.
So I'm going to go over like generally what our project is going to be. So our goal is that they create something that gives people in the future an idea of what life is like today, living in the time of this pandemic. And so students will pick one task for each class that they're in. So for example, if they're in both sociology and environmental science, they would pick a task from this column and a task from this column. Hopefully you can see that a little bit better. And that way they are still completing something that has relevance to their class, but we're also hoping that they are going to draw connections across content. And in our planning, sort of what we did to hopefully assist them in making those connections is we tried to use as much parallel language as possible in our learning tasks. So for example, when we talk about the government trying to mitigate impacts, we all use limit the impact in our language, just so that it was easier for students to draw those connections. We're also going to provide them with a graphic organizer to help them plan stuff out. So if they're only in one of our classes, they just have to complete this column. But if then they're in 2 different classes, then they're going to complete both columns. And then it's sort of like a Venn diagram situation where they can make their connections in the middle. We're also providing them this resource where we are providing them a lot of different options for the product that they could make. But we want to make sure that they know what resources are available to them if they want to make different projects. So we provided this to them as well. And I think a really key part of this project also is that we've broken down their tasks per week and sort of gave them an estimated amount of time that they're going to need to complete it, because students are really struggling to like manage their time and schedule themselves out right now. So for week 1, they're picking which tasks they're going to address and how they're going to present their product. We linked the resources right there. And then they just need to fill out a Google form letting their teachers know, like, I'm in econ and environmental, and these are the 2 tasks I'm going to be doing, and I think I want to make a documentary. This is going to help us better support them in the future on future weeks' work. The reason we only picked 2 learning tasks per week is because we seriously find so much more engagement when you limit the number of tasks. Even if you go up to 3, like I tried to do that in environmental alone, and I just saw a lot less engagement when I was giving them more work to do. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I should be going through. Oh yeah, so in terms of feedback, obviously we can give them feedback on their graphic organizer in terms of comments on the Google form, but we also want to meet with them like in person. So we're having them sign up for a Zoom check-in. Every teacher will have their schedule available. And we're hoping that between the 5 of us, it'll be pretty manageable to meet for like 5-10 minutes with each student, go over what their project is and what they're thinking, and give them feedback that they can then incorporate. And then once they submit their final project, you can see that we're estimating that this will take 4 weeks. We're hoping it'll take that long, but we are leaving that last like 5th week of instruction open right now, just in case this takes a little bit longer than we thought. But our hope for our last 5th week is that students are sharing this their like end product with each other so that they can kind of engage in some discourse about what other students were thinking.
Yeah, and so all of the links to everything we need is already on that same document. So our goal is that we'll post this along with, you know, their graphic organizer, and that's the only 2 things they really need to complete this task. Sometimes we post so many documents on Google Classroom that it's overwhelming for students. And we also created a Google Classroom for all of our contents together. So what we're going to do is go ahead and add our students on there ourselves on Sunday night so that it's ready and up for them on week 1. Before this, we also created a video explaining the assignment among all 5 teachers that we recorded and that we're going to share with them, just breaking down these different steps, and then week 1. The last thing I just want to briefly touch on is just that we are rolling this out Monday. So of course we are hoping for less stress. We are taking really informed decisions. We are considering what we have faced thus far and then adjusting, but we have yet to see, right? Is this actually gonna produce like as much engagement as we're thinking it will? And then also, we are going to have a Zoom meeting tomorrow with about 2 to 3 students to get to see it first and give us their like raw feedback. Like, what do we think about what we're seeing? Is this actually clear? Is this actually manageable if I'm taking 2 or 3 of these classes? Our support with the Zoom is intended to be ever like lasting. Like, it is not a place of punishment. Like, if you come to our Zoom week 3 and you haven't done anything, that's okay. Like, let's brainstorm how we can get you back on track and get you going so that you can still produce something meaningful. And so we're really trying to be intentional about how we word this process so that people don't get, or students don't get like really discouraged if they missed week 1. And then again, like Sam said, we thought about, you know, intentionally making those tasks smaller And we are planning on each week creating a short video with instructions, just so that for each week's tasks, so that it is very clear. And if students can't come to office hours necessarily, they can watch those videos. But we will have not just the Zoom time that they can sign up with us for, but we also have extra office hour spaces if those times don't work or if we need to adjust. So yeah, that's all we have for now. I'm not sure what the next step is, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies, very much for sharing all of that information. And as they pointed out, you will receive access to their project plan and what they're working on as a resource following the session today. If you have questions, please continue to drop those in the box below. Again, ladies, thank you for the work. I feel like when I was watching the chat box, people were excited about how clear it was, the process that you're following. And then Fabi, thanks for answering the question in terms of how you're going to engage with students, either face-to-face on Zoom or what they will be doing on their own. I'm now going to ask Phil, who is the instructional dean at Howard Fuller Academy, to talk with us in terms of some of the communication and engagement systems that they're using school-wide with students and with families. Turning it over to you, Phil.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. As Stephanie said, my name is Philip Smith. I am the Dean of Teaching and Learning at Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy, and I'm going to do my best to follow up from those two, because that was really, really captivating. I love that rubric. That's awesome. I was asked to present on some of our communication strategies that we've been using as a school, and so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Uh-oh. I cannot share my screen while the other participant is sharing. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks. Thank you, other participant. Okay. All right. Can I just get a thumbs up if you now see my screen? Awesome. Thank you. So I wanted to start by just kind of talking about our strategic communication plan from 4 layers. Then I can kind of go into each one and talk about some of the actions that we've been taking. So we're approaching communication from the perspective of the whole school, from individual grade levels. So at our school, that's 9 through 12. Then thinking about how individual classroom teachers are communicating with students and parents. And then lastly, our care team, which is made up of counselors and members of our school culture team, and how they're using data to communicate as well. So I'm going to start by talking about the whole school communication. I think the name of the game for us here is touch points. There's a weekly announcement video created by our principal, Judith Parker, that she will send out each week. It goes on our social media, the school website, and all of the various communication platforms that we have. Just with sharing announcements with students, checking in, even if it's a short video, just establishing a touch point for students and families each week has been really valuable. There's been a couple with myself on there where I'm communicating academic policy to the whole school as well. We use a communication tool called Remind, which is essentially like email and text form. I think that's the easiest way I could describe it. And Remind messages are sent out each morning to our entire school. Again, it's a daily touch point and almost a gentle little nudge for students and families. And there's usually a link or a photo of students working or something like that. But again, just a touch point. One of the most impactful things that we've been doing from an engagement perspective, and I want to thank my colleague, Miss Emma Kelly, who you'll hear from in a little bit, because she has really spearheaded and refused to let our staff shout out ritual go. And so each week staff will record shout outs for specific students. They get sent in, edited, and spliced together, and then it's posted for everyone to see on Fridays. And so that's been really, really great as well. Just another thing that that was a part of our weekly school rituals, and so keeping that going has been really, really valuable. So just thinking about how you can take the school rituals that you might have already had in place and figuring out how to leverage them in this new virtual learning environment. We've also been really attacking the social media, just really playing on the meme trends of the day. Like we had a quarantine houses where we listed students and staff and put it on Facebook and asked people to comment, you know, which house are you going to choose and things like that. And I think from that perspective, the idea is that any engagement is good engagement. We've seen spikes around our most effective social media posts, following up with students completing and submitting work with their teachers. And lastly, we conducted a virtual town hall meeting with parents pretty early on as part of DPI's guidance around waivers for learning hours and all that fun technical stuff. So that was really, really impactful just to get, I believe we had almost 40 parents participate, and to just get their perspective and voice and to hear from them was extremely valuable. Moving down to the grade level, it quickly gets a little bit more granular. I think the most important thing that we've been doing in terms of communicating to students at each grade level is we've created, we create each week a assignment checklist for each grade level that's posted first thing Monday morning. It's crystal clear. It's got all the students' classes and the assignment that they need to complete for that week. The first week we did it, it was filled with links and resources and things like that. And when we took a step back, we realized that it was a little bit overwhelming. So now we've pared it down to being just the name of the assignment, where the students can find it, and then a link to the screencasts, again, which you'll hear more about from my colleagues in a little bit. So that's been really helpful, just as kind of a home base for everybody in the grade level. Okay, it's Monday. This is where I need to start my week, looking at the grade level checklist. We've also started resuming grade level morning meetings, where we will, usually with about a week's advance notice, invite students to a Google Hangout at a certain time from that grade level, and we'll just share announcements with them, allow them to connect and be teenagers, you know, much to the despair of some of the adults. But, you know, it's been almost 6 weeks for our kids, and we've seen that, especially with our senior morning meeting last week, it led to a tremendous spike in engagement with classwork. So we're seeing a real direct correlation between non-academic engagement translating into academic engagement, which is really, really great. We've also set up grade level remind groups. So teachers at different grade levels have set up remind groups so they can quickly message or again give those nudges to an entire grade level. So that's been invaluable as well. Another thing that we noticed was that it was tough for parents to get a really clear look at their students' progress. And that was actually brought up in the virtual town hall meeting. So an action step that we took was now we have our advisors contacting 100% of their advisees' parents each week to give them a look at their engagement and achievement in all classes. So instead of having the English teacher call 80 students and the math teacher call 80 students, we're having our advisors make calls usually between 15 and 20, depending on the size, each week to give the parent an update on each class. And then lastly, our teachers have been really effective at leveraging students who are engaged to get in contact with their friends who the data says are disengaged. So I know one teacher of ours even said, you know, if you want to come to office hours for the second time this week, you got to bring 2 friends with you. So just using little things like that have been pretty effective. Moving on, thinking about how our classroom teachers are communicating. We use a variety of online learning tools to keep students engaged. I think the primary thing from an academic standpoint is getting students feedback on the work that they're submitting. Using Google Classroom and Summit Personalized Learning, which is one of our curriculum and learning platform partners. Again, kind of a real Swiss Army knife of communication tools that teachers are using. They're using Remind, email, phone calls, text messages, you name it, and they're trying it. They're also tracking which methods are most effective so that they know, okay, this parent really just likes to receive email, whereas this parent wants a phone call. So that's been helpful as well. We also have teachers conducting virtual office hours over Google Hangouts. So part of that weekly checklist includes a list of teachers' office hours for that week and a Google Hangout, or a link to a Google Hangout, excuse me, so the students can join. You know, I've got to give our principal a lot of credit because she foresaw the challenges and risks of using digital communication tools like Zoom and Google Hangouts in a virtual learning environment. And, so if you look at how New York City Public Schools has banned the use of Zoom between students and teachers, we've asked teachers that if they are just one-on-one with a student in a Hangout to just send an all-staff email asking someone to jump in and join. So that's the way that we kind of keep the digital classroom door open so that everybody can make sure that they stay safe as possible. Another really cool thing, and again, one of my colleagues is going to talk about this in a little bit or in one of the breakout sessions, a lot of our advisory leaders are getting really creative about how they're continuing to engage their advisees. So we've got teachers holding digital circles with students, and even some teachers are offering essentially like a digital study hall. Come hang out and we'll all work on different tasks. And the last thing, and I'm not going to say too much about this, but teachers are using screencasts to model their engagement with a new skill or with a learning task that they're asking students to work on as well. And you'll hear more from my colleagues about that. The last thing that I want to talk about was how our care team is using the data that teachers are generating. So again, our care team is made up of counselors and members of our culture staff, and they're taking data that's generated by classroom teachers in order to prioritize which families they need to reach out and connect with. This is a kind of deeper level of communication that's based on need. And so those calls are more focused on figuring out the potential barriers that are maybe outside of the school's control, and then offering resources, solutions, or if nothing else, just a listening ear to try to help the families problem solve.
So thank you so much for sharing all that. I'm going to ask, there were a couple people that were sharing in the box some similar strategies or other tools that they were using at their schools that were connected. So I'm going to ask that you continue to do that, as we will make sure that everybody has access to the chat box. And Phil, if you can drop in the chat box just a little bit of information about how you guys are coordinating like those systems, who's taking the lead in ensuring that those communication structures are seamless, because that would be helpful. Thank you so much for sharing. That was awesome. I do want to highlight, as a parent of 2 high school students, one of the things I loved about what Phil had to share was that communication to parents, because while my students have been getting work and Zoom calls from their teacher, as a parent, I haven't had that information, and it's made it challenging for me then to be supportive and hold my kids accountable who would really just like to sleep all day. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you so much, Phil. And now I'm going to turn it over to Roderick Perry, who is a special education teacher at Milwaukee Excellence. And I think it's so important what Roderick is going to share, because I think in this space, we have forgotten that there are still groups of students that need to be served, and that we have an obligation and a responsibility to continue to give them access to learning. So I'm going to turn it over to Roderick. Thank you for being here, Roderick.
All right, so the greetings. My name is Roderick Perry. I'm at Milwaukee Excellence Charter School. I've been here for a year. I taught 5 years at Ronald Reagan, same special education teacher. And our high school is pretty new, so we were all getting into the swing of things. And I felt like we had a lot of systems getting into place right before the situation where we had to close the schools, and it kind of stopped a lot of our progress. So these are some of the things that I've been doing, and I'll also discuss on a level of some of the things that our school is doing in general. I'm the special education teacher, but because I was the only one for the high school, I had a whole lot of different roles. And I collaborate mostly with our chief operations officer for both the middle school and the high school. And I collaborate with both principals. I collaborate with our CEO. It's just a lot of work that went into that first year that gave me a lot more experience than I anticipated having, which was, well, it could be good and bad, but I was ready for it when I got there. So how were we doing modifications for high school students? So it says have presenters share the document, but I'll share it. This is how we're doing our virtual learning. So we have supplementary services. on our website, on the online learning tutor, on our online learning portal, you can literally go to our page, and then this pops up for teachers and students, and for parents. And if you're a high school student, I'm going to speak more about high school because that's where I work mostly. You can literally go to your teachers tab at the bottom, and teachers have, similar to how we're doing it in school, teachers have recorded lessons for each class each day. So every day, each student has the ability to go online and look at a 10-minute video of some of the things that they would have been learning in class. And after I look at that 10-minute video, there's a lesson that's attached to it as well that they do. So they go through the practice problems. And the way that our school is grading it is based on the quizzes that they complete at the end of the week. So they look at the videos. And one of the things that I talk to about what's something that I think that we're doing that's pretty good to get students engaged is we have those virtual office hours. I'll go over to my tab. This is pretty easy to use. All of the teachers in all content areas across the school post these. So our students, what we notice is that our students they work very, very fast. They're used to that very, very fast, like always having something to do throughout the day. So we wanted to make sure that our online system is also beefed up with a whole lot of things for them to do throughout the week. So each class period, they're able to do things. Something that I'm doing specifically for students that have special needs is I supply, if you go to our online learning portal, anything that's highlighted in yellow or blue, like these yellow and blue highlights, that's me modifying it for students. You'll see me making those same videos. I'll have a 10-minute video talking about how to color code the Pythagorean theorem, or how to color code some of those more advanced things, or just taking step by step. Also linking Khan Academies, Think Circus. I'm linking those types of things in, giving background information. If you click on some of these things, you'll see like there's an NCEL chart for students to go to. So there's like similar to how in class, I would usually pull the students out or walk up and say, use this for that. If the student needs resources, they can literally just look, Mr. Perry highlighted in yellow, this must be for English. It's in blue, this must be for geometry. It's in purple, it must be for science or whatever subject you're looking for. Now, I noticed that there was not as much participation at the beginning. So what we did was, if you look here, like for example, if you were one of my students today, you would come, because at 2 o'clock I have an online, well, I told them I couldn't do it today because I'll be with you all. But if you go to today's date, what's today's date? April 23rd. You click on the office hours right there. I'm going to be on the office hours, and that's every day, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. I'm logging into office hours, and students log on, parents log on. If you have questions to ask me, some parents might go on and say, like, for example, when NPS sent out their survey to check to see which students needed laptops or computers, parents didn't know how to do that, or they weren't aware about what to do. So you can log on at 2 o'clock, and now I'll talk to you about the pandemic if you want to. What we're noticing is that the students are much more likely to complete work when their parents are involved, and when parents have constant communication with teachers. The students are much more engaged. We went from 30% of students completing their work to more than 80% just from having these types of communications with parents and with students. And it's an everyday thing. It's not like, and I feel like we're doing more work now online than we were some of the time in the school building, because you're literally like, I got to run downstairs to my office and then be on Zoom for an hour with students. Okay, so what happens is, at these times, these Zoom links are already linked into the Zoom app. They start automatically at 2 o'clock, and the other one starts at 10 o'clock. So when I get here, I'm already expected to see 6 students already logged in. Like, for example, I was looking at my phone while some of you were presenting, because they're texting me like, are we doing the small group today? So we're not, because I'll be here. But they're texting me, and then they let me know they're going to be joining. And I just click on it and go straight in. The lesson plans that we're going to go over, I'll have all of them down. The expectation is that the students that join the Zoom link have looked at the lessons. You don't have to have completed them. We're not penalizing students. One of the big things is that we recognize that some of these students' parents are healthcare professionals. They might be affected by this. So we want students to still be engaged, but we don't want to make it so that if you didn't do it, we don't want to prevent you from joining later. So we hold it, we make sure that when we communicate that we talk about it in that way. Let me go back to the document. It says that, okay, so the Miss White Stab, I also work with the middle school because we're such a close knit school. I feel like we're very like it's a small family. So I'm working with high school and with middle school. When we go into our virtual learning tab and you go into, which is something different that our school is doing when it comes to middle school and high school, I also support in the middle school. Here, for the middle school students, I don't have those face-to-face communications because I recognize that sometimes you have to, I want to have a parent or I want to have one of their guardians or one of the administrators present if I'm working with the middle school group. Unless I have prior communication with parents, I know that you have to have that communication prior to that. So in the middle school tab, you'll just see 2 lesson plans per week, and you'll see 2 videos that I create per week, just talking about some of the things. Like we're working on geometry topics now for the middle school students, and they're all there. Let me go back into the.
Frederick, can I ask you a question that someone posted in the chat box?
Yeah.
I know you talked about modifying the videos. What are some of the other ways that you're modifying the content based on the needs of your special education students that are in high school?
Okay, let me go back. So for example, you'll go over and if you click on let's go directly into the geometry class. So we're looking at the geometry for, I deleted, I deleted the information from other teachers when I brought this up because I didn't want to share our entire organization's stuff on here, but I can talk about it still. I got to ask them before I just put because their videos are on there too. So I got to ask them before I just put all their stuff up. So what I do is I'll go into a teacher's lesson plan and I'll see that, like for example, last week they were doing they were doing functions that involve sine, cosine, tangent. What I do as a special education teacher for a geometry teacher is I'll look at their lesson plans and then I'll go in and I'll apply supplementary services, such as when the teacher is doing the video discussing how to do sine, I'll upload another video or I'll upload resources that go directly to it so that when the student is looking at that video from the teacher, they have that resource right there as well in the second window. Or if you want to work with me, you can come to my office hours and I'll have that set. I'll go through it for 1 hour. Those lesson plans each day are 10 minutes. So the geometry lesson is 10 minutes. The English lesson is 10 minutes. If it's difficult for you to comprehend what's going on with the lesson that week, I'll go over it for 1 hour that day. So my office hours times is literally providing that specialized instruction. We got an email from from the district saying that we shouldn't be, that some of the things that are concerning special education services needed to be halted because it doesn't directly go towards what's written in the IEPs. But I think that this needs to be done because I don't want the students to feel that the information is not accessible to them. If you'll see graphic organizers, there's a lot of graphic organizers attached in there. But one of the things that I didn't want to do by over encumbering the system was if a student goes in and sees a teacher's lesson and then they see my 6 graphic organizers, then they're like, do I have to do all 6? Is this 7 assignments, or which one is the most important for me to do? That's why it's important for teachers to be for students to go to office hours so I can make sure you know which ones are assigned to the lessons that you need to do. And when I go in a little bit further, I'll show you how I'm making sure that students know which graphic organizers to use.
Frederick, you have about 1 more minute because we're running over schedule and I want to make sure that I can get to the next presenters. I also want to point out to everybody that when we go into the small breakout sessions, if you continue to have questions for any of the presenters up front, you can ask them in the breakout session.
Okay, I'll jump to the wellness document, wellness checks, and this will answer some of those questions as well. So we have the wellness checks are something that I do specifically to make sure that students are being engaged with the learning. So what we do is we have all of the students are assigned to a teacher, and then teacher contacts these students via text message 2 times a week, and they contact the students via phone call 2 times a week to make sure that students are understand that they need to be engaged. We leave notes from each contact based on what we discuss with the students. And we discuss, and we leave notes on whether they completed the quizzes in each class. Like some students have completed most of the assignments, some haven't, but it was the beginning of the week when I screenshotted this. So we just make sure that all students are completing quizzes for each class throughout the week. And that's, the wellness checks are more for like checking on family, checking on completing work. And do discuss social media, so I won't go into that, but we have some of our, if you do complete lessons, inside of those lessons, you'll get links to the social media things, like we have a game night tonight. So if you did the if you did the geometry lesson from last week, you'll know more about the game night that's going on right now. It's going on at 6 o'clock. So students that are engaged with with learning online, and parents, then they get more information about some of our social aspects, and that also increased our and participation by 50%. I'll give you the time to go over into your next presenter.
Thank you, Frederick. That was so helpful. And I love the idea that no matter what is required, that you're continuing to service those kids and giving them opportunities to access, as well as continuing to ensure that they can engage academically and culturally in your environment. I want to encourage everyone, if you have questions for Frederick, to drop them down below. And I also want you to come back to the idea that you had. What were those pillars you were looking for, and what have you heard thus far that is connecting to those pillars? Lenny, I see that you're unmuted. Would you like to add?
You know, and that's exactly the place where I was going to go, Stephanie, is, you know, what we heard in the chat box is, as teachers and as school leaders, you wanted your kids to feel connected, you wanted them to feel motivated, you wanted the work to be streamlined, or there to be a streamlined system that was supportive of kids. You wanted things to feel normal and consistent and a sense of comfort for kids. And so, you know, I know we have one more set, but I guess I wanted to bring everybody back to those were the big things that we heard. So think about what you heard in the first presentation about you wanted kids to feel connected to what was happening right now, that it would be meaningful for kids. I think, you know, Phil, you talked about keeping things normal for kids. So rituals that were in place, keeping those consistent for kids. And we're hearing a lot about office hours, and, you know, I love, Frederick, when you had the join me on Zoom, like come and join me, not just these are my office hours, but bringing kids in. So I guess I wanted to bring us all back to those big pieces that we listed in the chat box. They're pieces that we're seeing. So as you're hearing this, the last group as well is in the breakout, think about, again, how does that take you back to what you saw is your pillars or your goals, and pull out what you can, even if it's not the entire project or the entire piece. There are so many things embedded that fit what you all called out as the important pieces for you.
Thank you so much, Lenny. I am now going to turn it over to Courtney and Emma, who are also from Howard Fuller Academy.
Hi, everybody. This is my first time sharing a screen, so we'll see how this goes.
I also posted this PowerPoint into the chat, so hopefully that works. If I did the sharing thing wrong, please let me know and I can try and fix that.
So because we have a little bit less time, I think what we'll probably spend most of our time sharing with you is the focus that we have as a school staff on making screencasts that don't just give directions for how to do something, but actually model how the teacher, as an expert in a skill, is teaching the student how to do that skill. We decided early on that we wanted to continue new learning. We wanted to continue teaching students new skills during this time, both because we want to make sure that students are progressing towards being ready for college, but knowing that once students are in college, they will likely be taking an online class at some point where they will have to be learning from videos. And so we have a couple of example screencasts in later slides, but some of the best practices that we've worked on perfecting throughout the year start with before we even film. So we've worked hard to make sure that before we record ourselves doing an assignment, that we complete the assignment on our own and think through what steps we took as a learner completing that assignment, and making note of those to share with our students in the video, and also thinking about what pitfalls that we had to avoid or what misconceptions we had to avoid, so that we could also show those to students throughout our screencast. And then we want to script out an outline of what we are going to say so that everything in our lesson remains really focused. And then when we begin filming our model lesson or our screencast, we want to make sure that our videos are less than 10 minutes. And we do that by including a very focused learning objective that is just focused on one skill per video. So we would never make a screencast that's how to write an entire essay. We focus on a much more specific skill that aligns to the final product that we're asking students to create. And after we introduce that objective in the screencast, we connect that skill that we're going to be teaching them either to college or to real life or to the final summative assessment or project. After that, we review the criteria for success. So we reference the cognitive skill rubric that we are going to be using to grade their mastery or progress towards mastery. And we actually explain like what in real language does that mean? What is that proficient or mastery look like for that skill? And then we state the steps that we would take. So we think back to when we completed the assignment ourselves, and we share out those steps to complete the assignment. And then we complete the example using I statements so that we explain our expert thought process as the expert showing how to do that skill. And then we also kind of throughout our think out loud about the pitfalls that we want to avoid or the misconceptions. A lot of times we will also model in a video how to do a self-assessment. So for example, if I was teaching a student how to introduce a quote or some textual evidence, I might pause and say, okay, now I'm going to read back over what I have. If I look at the rubric, it seems like right now I did this part, but I still need to add a little bit more here. So I think I'll add this to show that we are, as learners, always self-assessing and making changes and improvements as we complete something. And then after we've completed that example and talked through how we did it, we review the steps that we took to complete that so that we're leaving students at the very end with what we did, and then kind of send them on their way to try it on their own. We use predominantly two platforms to do our screencasts. I really like the website Screencast-O-Matic. It's a free screencast software that's really user-friendly. And then a lot of teachers at our school, we have MacBooks, so a lot of teachers use the QuickTime screen record. Kelly, do you want to add anything?
Not really. No, I use QuickTime screen record because for whatever reason, the Screencast-O-Matic doesn't work on my computer. So QuickTime for me.
So like I said, we included a couple of examples if you want to watch those to get an idea. And then, yeah, go ahead.
So once we're done with the screencast, one of the really crucial parts of making sure students are following along with us is giving really quick feedback and really timely feedback. Once a student submits an assignment, we try and provide that feedback really quickly in whatever form that comes in. Sometimes I'll give them feedback through an email or through Google Comments. We always try and connect the feedback back to the objective, the criteria for success, the rubrics that we've referenced, especially making note of referencing maybe some steps or misconceptions or pitfalls you referenced in your screencast. And in this crazy time of students trying to figure out how to do everything online, sometimes they overlook a step and overlook that screencast. So if the assignment is completely incorrect or not filled out, sometimes what we'll do is just leave a link to the screencast as feedback and say, make sure you're watching this. Within the screencast, and especially in the examples, you might hear us say something like, okay, pause this video, go to your assignment and see what you can do now, and then pick up once you're done.
Sorry, I went forward and I don't know how to get back. Oh, I went forward again. There we go.
And just the reason why we make sure that we give quick feedback is to keep students motivated. Although it might be unrealistic for us to give feedback every single day, it's important that students know that their work is meaningful, right? Like their work is being looked at and read through, and that the work that we continue to do is working towards something bigger than just we're trying to give you busy work. It also increases your credibility with students and parents, and it kind of allows you to say, hey, I'm here with you, maybe not in the physical space, but I am looking at your work to make sure that we're on track in whatever project that we're working on.
And I just want to highlight from that instructional lens that you were focusing on, that need for students to be in a space to receive some kind of feedback and some encouragement that an adult is paying attention to what it is that they're doing. As we head into the breakout session, again, I just want to thank Phil, Fabi, Sam, Courtney, Emma, and Frederick for taking their time when we kind of call them to pull all of that together and share, because I think it is so meaningful and so helpful as we're all on different stages of this journey as we shift to this virtual learning environment. So thank you to all of you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you to my culture group. I had a really good discussion. So we're gonna start with the culture group just sharing out maybe one key takeaway from the discussion and maybe one lingering question. For everybody else, I'm gonna ask you in the chat box below to just type in one takeaway you had from your group. And I'm gonna turn it over to Ms.
So one of the things that we talked about and we're focusing on was how to create and maintain discussions among students. So there's a lot of like teacher to student conversation, but seeing how we can include more communication between student to student. So that's something that we were talking about. And also, I mean, I have a question of like, how do people do that? So.
Thank you, Emma. And can I have the person from group 2 to share kind of one highlight from the discussion and one remaining question that you have? I only see one thought in the chat box. So again, in that chat box below, I'll write your takeaway from your full-out group, from your breakout group.
It's me or you, Phil?
Matt, we voluntold
All
you.
right, fine. Yeah, I think summing up with one takeaway, not three.
You can give 3, Matt.
Well, I got 2. The biggest one I have is just the necessity for short and sweet. Don't overwhelm and try and get the most engagement out of something rather than get it a little bit out of a bunch. And then we also talked a bunch about the need to, especially with high school, not neglect the engagement of parents as well as a method of getting students engaged. They're not too old for that, despite being high schoolers. So. And then we didn't actually get to identify a question, so I don't necessarily have one. Maybe someone else might in our group can chime in for that.
So I think the question from the group that we talked about at very end was, what is the right amount? What's the right amount to teach? What's the right amount to expect of students? What's the right amount to expect from families? What's the right amount?
And I think in response to that group, like that question keeps coming up. And on the City Forward Collective website, if you look on there, you'll find what some states are pushing out. I think particularly Melissa has looked at Illinois that has a fantastic kind of policy around amounts. But again, those decisions are going to be made like based on your population. But what I feel like is that offered some really good guidance for those that are looking. And we'll make sure we attach that resource when we come back. We are at the end of time. So Melissa, I'm gonna ask you to skip my virtual learning tips guides, but I do want to thank everybody for being here today. Before you go, again, we're always looking for feedback to help us determine what the next steps can be. So Melissa's going to drop a link to a survey in the box. When you've completed the survey, type done. And then we also want you to answer this question. Based on what I've learned today, I will. We always want to walk away with a commitment. We started in this space of really reflecting on ourselves and what our vision of learning in this virtual environment could be for our scholars. So as you think about what you've taken away from the session today, what is your commitment to living out that vision that you've created for your scholars? A huge shout out once again to all of our presenters in the small group and in the large group. You did a fantastic job. I sent Jody Bell, our director of teacher talent, who had a K-8 group yesterday, and said, nah, high school is where it's at. So thank you all so much for what you've done and what you've shared today. I'll be quiet now so that you can work on that survey. Thank you so much again for being here, and thank you so much for all that you are doing on behalf of scholars and their families in this city. Ladies, did you have anything to add?
No,
No.
thank you again. We appreciate you all.